Akira was first released in 1988, but looking at the movie now, you'd be surprised at how recent it looks. This is partially because the movie takes place in the future, but it's more due to the fact that this was pretty much the first anime to influence so much of the pop culture we consume today. The movie technically takes place in the future, which is now, but it actually managed to get quite a few things right. The world of Akira is set in a dystopian 2019, which can be crazy to look back on, now that we've actually lived through that year. The city of Tokyo is devastated after a Big Bang event known as Akira nearly consumes all of the city, and the city is riddled with gangs and crime. Our main character, Tetsuo, was one of the many who gained supernatural powers from the Akira event. Tetsuo eventually uses his newfound powers to threaten a large military base that detains those who have supernatural abilities and experiments on them. Now, even if you haven't seen Akira, you might think that sounds familiar. Well, that's because you're probably thinking of the storyline of Stranger Things. Similar to Akira, in Stranger Things, Eleven is a child that has been detained by the government due to her supernatural abilities. We won't get too into the details about both stories, but there are some clear homages to Akira on Stranger Things. And the creators of Stranger Things have said that it was probably the biggest influence. If you've seen the movie Chronicle, it was probably one of the first movies that came into your mind when I described the story of Akira. By the end of Akira, Tetsuo's powers completely overtook his sanity, and he eventually goes on to commit an absolute massacre of innocents. We see something very similar happen in Chronicle, in which one of the three teenagers who manage to obtain telekinetic powers constantly abuses his powers and ends up killing many innocents. The director of Chronicle, Josh Trank, said that Akira was one of his favorite films, and that you can probably tell how big of an influence that it had on Chronicle. Kanye West has also talked about his love of anime, specifically Akira, in the past. If you take a look at his music video for Stronger, you can see that the entire video is essentially a callback to the movie. The motorcycle chase, the hospital scene, all of these were directly inspired by Akira. And it's not just Kanye West, a lot of hip-hop artists reference Akira in their songs.
I rediscovered Akira and actually knew what it was. It's almost like when you like smell something that smells really awesome and it reminds you of your childhood. Like I saw this thing and I was like, oh my god, I remember exactly where I was when I saw it for the first time.
I got the Akira on the wall, I just can't follow they law. Swear to God that they know me, they don't know me at all. In my burrow, feeling unstoppable like Tetsuo. Akira in the membrane, queens get the money.
Yeah, boy, I got you. Bite like Canada, and I got it all except a jar like Akira.
Akira has also been referenced in a bunch of different movies and TV shows. Even the little details about the movie, such as the iconic bike slide, have been recreated in shows like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, Adventure Time, and more. You've probably even seen a recreation of the Akira slide without even knowing where it was initially from. The movie was so iconic that some of the things it made popular just turned into regular movie tropes, where you don't even need a reference. One of the greatest impacts that Akira had on the entertainment industry at large is the way it changed animation, specifically traditional animation. Akira offered a viewing experience that was unprecedented in animation, even including the iconic Studio Ghibli films. And you might be wondering how it managed to achieve that experience. Well, Akira uses a rather different animation technique called cell animation. In cell animation, every single frame of the entire movie is completely hand-drawn. On top of that, Akira is shot in 24 frames per second, which is the standard for anime, but the difference is that most anime only use 4 to 12 different frames that are unique. It was one of the first major animation blockbusters to do so, and it wasn't necessary for the story, but the producers decided to do it anyway just to enhance the viewing experience. Over 160,000 different animation cells were used in this film. The result is one of the smoothest pieces of animation you will ever see in your life. Every single frame you see in Akira will be completely unique. There was absolutely no cutting corners with this film, and you can just feel the amount of effort that was put into making this film. There was also no computer animation used to speed up the process. During that time, computer animation started to become more popular with films like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, using aspects of computer animation to give those films a new feel. The creators of Akira decided to take another route, producing some high quality frames without the use of any computers at all. since the technology was still in its infancy at the time. Using CGI would lead to Akira having to sacrifice some of the quality, and there was no way that the creators of this film were willing to let that happen. Sometimes life imitates art, and Akira is no exception. Since the movie takes place in a future that in the real world is now the present, there have been some predictions that it made that actually ended up being true. Akira predicted the 2020 Tokyo Olympics in a lot of different ways. Not only did it manage to correctly predict which city the Olympics would be taking place in, but they also managed to predict one crucial aspect of the 2020 games: empty stadiums. The post-apocalyptic world was no place for the Olympics to take place, so the organizers decided not to let anyone into the stadium. All of this is eerily similar to the COVID-19 pandemic initially preventing the Olympics from even happening, and then being forced to hold it in an empty stadium. On top of that, even the public reaction to the Olympics was more or less the same in the movie and in real life. Underneath a signboard that counts down to the Olympics in the movie, someone has tagged some graffiti saying just cancel it already. This is also quite similar to how the Japanese public opinion quickly turned against holding the 2020 Olympics in their country, with brand new risks threatening their national security thanks to the pandemic. While it's a bit of a stretch to say that the movie accurately predicted everything, it's still pretty insane to think that something that was probably just a passing remark in the movie ended up being the thing that was most accurately predicted. Today, if you go around the street and ask people what anime is, most people under the age of 30 will be able to tell you what it is.
I love anime.
I think it's sick as fuck.
Do you guys watch?
Ew. Never been an anime type person.
You look like an anime
I
character.
look like an anime character.
Tell me not.
This was not the case in 1988. Most people, in the United States at least, hadn't even seen animation beyond the traditional media houses like Disney and Hanna-Barbera. Yes, there were anime like Astro Boy which developed a following in the West, but those were usually a one-time thing. Akira was the movie that pretty much defined the term anime for most people in the Western world back in the late 80s and early 90s. It came out around the same time as Disney's Renaissance era, which already increased the demand for high-quality animated films. And when it came to quality, Akira was pretty much second to none. Akira was dubbed in numerous different languages, which made it more accessible for viewers to see. Some credit Akira as being the movie that single-handedly popularized anime in the United States and the Western world at large. It only sold around 250,000 tickets in the United States, but it still managed to become one of the highest-grossing foreign animated films in the country. In addition to the underground dubbing communities mentioned in a previous video about anime piracy, Akira also paved the way for Japanese animators to start focusing more on the overseas potential of anime. Following the US release of Akira, we saw the likes of Cowboy Bebop, Sailor Moon, and eventually films like Spirited Away and series like Dragon Ball Z take American pop culture by storm. None of this would have been possible without the success of Akira building confidence for both Japanese studios and their American partners for the market potential. What are your favorite memories about Akira, and what topics would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.